Thanks very much. It was a really interesting film, and I think you really looked at aspects of the aid industry and the development industry that really need to be tackled. And I know that you were looking more at what the West can do to remove these perverse systems. But in the case of looking at how we change these policies, institutions, and enabling factors to ensure that poor people can find their own way out of poverty. Sorry that's a bit of an ugly way of summarizing it. But how do you envision that poor people will be able to negotiate with structures of power in order to shift those patterns? I felt there was a slight missing link, and it might have been because the film, had to fit so much into such a short period of time. But what about the role of collective action, things like collective bargaining? You mentioned poor people being trapped between governments and trade unions, and I don't think that trade unions and the poor are mutually exclusive. And so what about the importance of political activism and collective activism amongst the poor as well?
I mean, I think underlying these kind of core rights, if you want to talk about them that way, or core institutions, is one of them is what you'd call the right of free association, right? And the right of free association is probably first articulated, it's articulated in different places, but in the West you see a real kind of argument against monopoly rights and for the right of free association in Thomas Aquinas' little tract called Contra Impugnates, where he's arguing that if you are naturally competent to do something, then you have the right to be able to join to do this. And this becomes, in many ways, some of the moral and theological and philosophical arguments for the rights of trade unions, right? Which, as you say, are not, I totally agree with you, not somehow exclusive of helping poor people. The facts that they don't always help poor people, I think, is something we need to acknowledge, and that they're not always on the side of poor people, I think, is extremely important to acknowledge. But nevertheless, collective bargaining can be a very important tool. And this is also related so that the right of the ability to register a business and the right of the ability to join together in collective bargaining actually stem from the natural right of association, which I think has to be affirmed. And I totally agree with you that it is something we didn't address, but it can have a very, very important place to play.